3-month training course and started working for Lifeline, taking calls. The technology changed a lot over those years, mostly for the better, but for me the fundamental problem was that a telephone system was introduced that I couldn't operate because of my blindness. The buttons changed their spots, so to speak, and I didn't feel confident to be taking calls. The call sheet is central to being able to record the information that's necessary, and when I first was invited to go and have a look at it, I thought that it probably wouldn't be a huge task to fix it. My day job involves looking at web page code, so I spent a Saturday writing sample code for the developers. It provides Lifeline with counsellors who otherwise wouldn't be able to do the work, and it provides people who otherwise couldn't do the work with a way of contributing to society, and that's important. Social expectations of people with significant disabilities are still fairly low, so when I do fairly ordinary things, people say, well, isn't that amazing? It's only amazing, I think, because people don't believe it's possible.
The volunteer is the heartbeat of Lifeline. Lifeline nationally took over 540,000 calls last year. It's the most they've ever taken. Most of our crisis supporters will be on a 4-hour shift, and they'll probably take anything between 4 and 8 calls in a shift. The type of person that comes in to volunteer for Lifeline is a very special type of person, and it's great.
I really appreciate the fact that Alan Walker and Wesley Mission started Lifeline. It's a huge resource for people in distress. Personally, it's been one of the privileges of my life.
I'm continuing my thoughts on the Old Testament prophets. Now, there is an interesting New Testament verse that mentions Elijah in James chapter 5:17, and I want to read it to you. Elijah was a human being even as we are. The very humanity of people is so important in trying to understand who they are. And sometimes some of the greatest people in the story of the world, in the story of Scripture, are very ordinary people who display extraordinary qualities. But when we study Elijah's life, he seems anything but a person like ourselves. He was a man of granite strength. There were times when he stood up against other prophets, other leaders, powerful characters, and held firm to what he believed, the kind of person he was. Granite strength. He was the kind of person that only emerged infrequently. You don't find Elijahs everywhere you turn. So now I'm going to read to you from the Old Testament, 1 Kings chapter 19, 1-5. In the light of all the positive things I've just said, let's hear these words. Now, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, and how he'd killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a message to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't take your life like that of one of them. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. And when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servants there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. You didn't expect that, perhaps. I've been talking about extraordinary people who are really ordinary as they present to us, but extraordinary in qualities. But this is Elijah, man, as we've said, of granite steel. And yet, however, at the same time, he's a man who has all those qualities of strength. And yet here we find him running away. And I think it's helpful for us to see that this part of his life existed. We can see how in many ways James was right. He's just like us. You see, if weak people can become bold, it's equally true that strong people can suddenly become weak. Elijah had to face his own physical weakness, something all of us have to do. Gosh, didn't we enjoy listening, even though it was a bit painful, that interview just a few moments ago? Well, we heard somebody share out of their own experience how for nearly a year in hospital, 50 times, more than 50 times, resuscitated. Tremendously challenging experience, a moment that exposes our sheer humanity. Elijah experienced depression in what we might only call loneliness. Depression. You don't expect that in a prophet. You say that's what happens to weak people. No, not at all. Strong people can experience that. And many of us that have been down that road know it can happen in our lives. Such loneliness tends to discouragement and depression. But we can discover, as we heard just a few moments ago, that God can be with us through the most difficult of experiences. And the prophet also experienced failure, which can lead to despondency. So there are two things that I'd want to say from a passage like this and lessons that we might learn. Firstly, if it is a failure, then it's a high failure, which is infinitely better than a low success. To go through that experience of failure is something that is very difficult, but it can be very powerful. It can empower us, if you like, to live our lives. And secondly, the failure makes him very usable by God. And the chapters that follow tell us it was the pathway to a wonderful work. When you start turning the chapters of how the prophet is condemned by Ahab, and then we have the amazing stories of how he stood up for God in this prophetic ministry, we know that none of that would have been possible if he hadn't realized that as he goes through these moments of despondency, despair, and depression, that God lifts him. God holds him in the hollow of his hand and grants him the opportunity to stand up and be there. Now, this morning, today, this evening, wherever you find yourself, you may find that there's a point in today when you feel down and low. Isn't it good news to know that God lifts us up? He's the provider of that sustenance for our life that gives us confidence. And if you're one of those people in life that is prone to depression and despondency, just be assured a lot of people have been there before you, and there's nothing that you can have to face in life that you have to face alone, and that you can find yourself lifted up from where you are and put on a new way, a new path, and a new opportunity in life. So here's somebody, one of those great prophets of the Old Testament, who really shows to us that it's possible to be a person who's brought down, lifted up, strong, weak, and all at the same time. God bless you today with his confidence and his grace.
If you would like to know more about today's topic, or for more on Keith's message, contact Keith by writing to Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or email impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.